Jesus is very sensitive about this. Don't miss that. He says, I want you to get this new wine, but I don't want you to move past being able to restore and maintain your credibility by understanding that it's not our job to do damage. Because the drum major instinct is one that if it's not checked, it will cause us to do damage to other people and other religions, faith, and other races and other genders. It will cause us to do damage. And Dr. King says if that goes unchecked, we will never reach this dream of God uniting all of his creation together. We have got to learn to check our instinct to excel by excluding. Jesus is very clear. Get the new wine. I want you to have it, baby, be all you can be, but not at the expense of someone else. I love because credibility when it comes to Christians is about our ability to be witnesses of the grace, not destroyers of it. Be witnesses of the transforming power of Jesus. I want to tell you another story. Most of y'all know that I was a hospice chaplain for years. And so I had lots of patients, a lot of them a lot older. And keep in mind, I was in my mid-20s. So I had a lady who was in her late 90s. And man, she became one of my best friends. She was legally blind, couldn't see anything. She was in a nursing home. I used to visit her all the time. And she used to love to sing hymns, and so your boy would come and bring his hymnal, and we would sing together and hold hands, and I would serve her communion. And her family lived out of town, so I called them. They live in Florida, and I would call them and say, here's how his mom is doing. And as it got towards the end of her life, I increased my visits with her because we just kind of got tight. And what was amazing was you had this older white woman and this young black guy who became friends. Totally different generations, totally different races, totally different perspectives. And I didn't know this until after she died, that her children said that, that our mother was raised, obviously she's in her 90s. She was raised at a time when segregation was legal, when that thought process was very much a part of who she was. That was just who she was. And I never knew that. And then they told me maybe about 2 weeks before she died, she asked them, is Reverend Hardwick black? I don't know if it was the Barry White voice or... Remember, she can't see. Here's my point. You had two people from totally different generations. She grew up in a time period where it was perfectly acceptable. And I grew up in a time period where, as a young black man, I struggled with stuff like that. Can I just be honest with you? And what is amazing about not being a destroyer of people who have been carriers of God's grace in different seasons of their life is that even though she was raised to hate black people, she told her daughters, and they told me this after she died, they said, well, yes, Reverend Hardwick's black. She said, that's okay because I love him. But if I had been a person who was intent on being a destroyer instead of a dreamer, that relationship and that reconciliation never would have happened. But just to know that she grew up in a different time and season in her life, and maybe she has some views that were different from mine, but my job is not to be a person who shifts past learning who she is and understanding who she is and understanding why she thought the way that she thought and serving her and being a carrier and container of God's grace as I sat at her bedside and I fed her communion with my own hands and I held her hand and sang to her. And somewhere in that process, the grace of God dropped down on two people who should not love each other, and he transformed and shifted a relationship. And the only way that we gain credibility with the community is if we become carriers of grace who are concerned about what people are concerned about, and we don't be destroyers of people's past and story. I could have been the type of guy, so I'm not serving her. I know what she believes in. I know where she came from. I know how her life was. I know she probably don't like me, but there's something about being the type of person who understands, watch this, that new wine is never to be used for destroying, only for building up. And man, there was something powerful about that relationship that changed my life forever. Because you had someone who should not have liked me, and you had me who should not have liked her. But man, when Jesus drops the new wine, it is not used for destroying, it is used for building.